We'll jump right into release planning and updates. Someone want to start for maybe implementation?
I can give a quick update on the life cycle. We are continuing work on Stackpacks. No release in sight, but hopefully, right, eventually. And was it last week that we shipped our patch? Maybe we didn't talk about that in this forum, but we did ship a patch of the life cycle on, maybe it was Thursday. So that fixes some caching issues with the Buildpack API 06.
Awesome. Any updates on the platform side, or do we have anybody from the platform team here? Guess we can get an update next week when Javier's back. And anything on the distribution side? Is anybody here a distribution maintainer? All right, we'll put that one off till next week also.
Always.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, there's no releases.
All right, move on to our weekly RFC review. Give me 1 second to share my screen. All right. First thing is add a build right flag for layers. Where are we at this one?
I think Emily had an idea. I put that on the agenda for us to discuss later.
We'll talk about this one when we get to it on the agenda. Next one is add bomb to layer content metadata. Seems like this has approvals. Where are we at?
I added one last comment today. I've already forgotten what it was.
I have that. I cover that in a lower line instead of that one, but it is addressed.
Okay.
Awesome. So this looks like Terrence, if you have any thoughts on this one, I think you're the only core team person left. Can't hear you. Or I can't hear you at least. Can other people?
I think you're muted, Terrence. It's like software muted. There you go.
Yeah, that's right. He was having audio problems earlier today.
Audio problems. Can you hear me now?
There you go. Very quiet.
Very quiet. Can fix that. Is that better? Can you hear me? No.
Getting
Barely
louder.
hear you.
Hello? Is that better?
Louder yet.
Hello?
Yep, pretty good now for me.
Okay.
Not the same, really, but we hear you enough, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't have any, I think, strong opinions on this one, so I'm happy for it to move forward.
Sounds good. All right. So I guess this one will enter. Do we actually need to put this in FCP? When did we get the last? Should this enter FCP right now?
Yeah.
I think it has enough votes to enter, and my one comment notwithstanding, I'm happy for you to put in FCP.
FCP ending. This be what? May 12th, 7 days.
Yep, it'd be the 12th.
Cool. All right. And then allow setting default command line arguments that can be overridden by the user. This is the one that's blocked on larger changes. I think, Emily, you said you had maybe going to write up some of those larger changes.
Yes. I
Cool.
have no other update to provide on this so far.
Checking in. Disambiguate layer metadata files from app metadata. This is a kind of controversial one.
I think the last few points are around like backwards compatibility and how it will play when you have Buildpacks with different APIs, and if the platform API is different as well, how it will all come together.
I added a comment with some of those scenarios. I think there actually is a solution for all of those. I just think we should add it to the doc because otherwise we might be confused later.
Which format is being proposed here? Is it
There's one. This format is the just the one below that. That's the proposed format, and there are 4 alternatives, which I don't know how people feel about all of those, but
like just
I like the one that's proposed. I think we need to use one of the alternatives for a certain backwards compatibility scenario, basically. But the one thing I'll call to Steven's attention while he's looking at it, I think you should re-review this one, is that one of your concerns was longer layer path names. And the proposed solution here does still have longer layer path names. So I think you'll have to decide how much you care about that. But I think it's better for other reasons and it's worth the trade-off.
there was one other alternative which I did not put, which was renaming layers in config to just L and C, which you proposed, Emily. That might.
Yeah, I assumed people would hate that. I kind of like it, but
I'm still not convinced it's better than the way it is now, especially with output at the top. But maybe we could add this one to the agenda and talk about it after we talk about build right. And then the last one is guidelines for accepting component level contributions. This moves forward. Looks like this enters FCP. So it's not already in FCP, right? I didn't just miss that. No, cool. So what, 12, 512? And add the label. All right, and that concludes our RFC review. Next thing on the agenda is build right flag RFC. Sam, did you add that one this week?
Yep. Let me try and share.
I'm going to try to take notes again. Please edit and correct.
Okay. So this was the RFC around, for those who haven't read it yet, it's around plugging a hole we have in our current export system where like Buildpacks coming after a certain Buildpack can unintentionally modify the layer So the idea was to just freeze and freeze the layer just after the Buildpack build executes, so that the layers are still visible to the subsequent Buildpacks, but it's been marked, like it's been frozen for export right after the build. And then in order to like have this functionality as an actual feature, which is like having some shared workspace for multiple Buildpacks to collaborate upon by adding a new layer flag, which is a build right flag. So the difference is when you set that build right flag to true, it defers the like freeze to the end of the entire build phase instead of to the end of a specific Buildpacks build stage. And I added a couple of examples to justify the use cases for each of them. But there was this suggestion by Emily that we could instead have like a Buildpack that runs twice. So maybe something like it sets up something at the beginning in the order that it's supposed to, and then you have a cleanup or some other like finalize phase at the end, which can do some more changes before it's exported out. I think I've also seen this requested elsewhere, maybe in some discussion or some issue where someone wanted to set up a Buildpack layer and then clean it up at the end of the build process. So maybe something like that. But the idea here was if you have like a Buildpack, which is like a C cache Buildpack, which contributes a C cache dir for the subsequent Buildpacks to use, it should be able to write something to the build bomb at the end of it saying that these were the contents present during the build process. The alternative could just be that each, which doesn't really make sense, but each Buildpack could that is acting on the C cache layer could also somehow contribute their own changes to the layer metadata, since they do have access to it. But that seems to be breaking the abstraction here that you should only care about like these cache directories or some odd directories and not the Buildpacks themselves. So this does make sense to me. I guess it adds upon what I originally proposed, that you add another stage at the end to like figure out any metadata changes rather than actual layer content change, like layer content changes.
I brought this up because I'm concerned about the accuracy of the bomb. And I don't think, especially because some of the examples we came up with were ones where downstream Buildpacks are unintentionally modifying upstream layers. I think it makes sense to add this phase at the end if we really want to allow these writable layers, where as the creator of the layer and the Buildpack that understands its structure, you should be able to see what changes happened and modify the bomb accordingly. And that would allow you to get that data back and make decisions using it next time.
How would you expose the location of this layer to subsequent Buildpacks, right? So I know part of this is to be sort of to set up a layer to allow for a collaborative build process. How would you expose that layer without having to just sort of intuit that you know that it's in the layers dir at whatever name you called it? Would you just pass it via like an environment variable? Is that the idea?
Yeah, so like the examples here are like you set a build environment variable. Typically the layer points to like some shared build and cache directory or something else, where like a lot of ecosystems have a concept of some like shared build directory or cache directory, and you just set the environment variable to that, and subsequent tools can just reuse that during their build process without having to know the structure of the build pack, the other build pack, or where it's like directories are situated.
And to be clear, I assume that if I had build right, build would be not a flag that I could include, but could I include any other flag? So could I put cache and launch on a build right layer as well?
Yeah.
I think symlinks are another way to expose these layers. Like I know in our Maven build pack, we symlink home M2 into a layer. And that's not falling into one of these situations. We don't expect other tools downstream to be adding things to it, but you can imagine other situations where you're following a similar pattern where you symlink a well-known path, a path that wouldn't get exported into a layer. And then that would be available to the downstream build packs for the rest of the build.
This is actually pretty exciting. We currently have to do a lot of shenanigans to install .NET in chunks because it kind of expects all the installation to exist in one directory. So having a directory where we could sort of collaboratively symlink things together and install it, I think would be really helpful.
Emily, you had a concern about, or you had a suggestion to allow the build pack that created a build right layer to update its bill of materials entry after other build packs have processed it. I worry about that that's the wrong person to write to the layer, or the wrong build pack to write to the layer metadata, in that it'd be very hard for other build packs made arbitrary changes to the layer. It'd be very hard for that original build pack to go back and kind of analyze the files on disk and figure out what they are and then write information about them. I think that's like, I agree it's a problem, but I don't know if build pack that contributes those entries should be that build pack. I wonder if instead it'd be enough just to say that the earlier build pack that expects changes from other build packs to the build right layer, it can also expose the path to the individual layer bomb or another environment variable that the other build packs can have to.
Like, I wonder if we need both, because some of these examples were things like accidentally getting installed because downstream build packs don't know that they're, invoking some tool which is changing something in one of these paths. I think most of the use cases where this makes sense, it's like you're not just providing an arbitrary dumping ground, you're providing a structured dumping ground where it's like, this is where each type of thing goes. And like, if this is a root dir for a well-known tool, you sort of know how it's laid out. So you could add, you should be able to add metadata describing what's in there. What you might miss is like if there was additional metadata that participated in the installation process, like some special URI that wasn't captured in the output there.
Can we use stuff like the kind of workdir plus slices for this kind of stuff? Because that already inherently supports, I guess, the mechanism of a world writable plus layering. I mean, it may not be how we want to structure it, but I wonder if it belongs in a directory that is not /layers/ the build pack's name, if other build packs can also write to it.
That was gonna be my other idea, sort of like a shared layers section where one build pack creates it, and other people can go look for the things there, but you have to slice out what you've changed. There's a lot of room for build packs to do that wrong, though. I worry. We could use timestamps or something to do it for them.
Here's a thought. So the reason that we don't just use the apter for this right now is that the apter always gets exported,
Yes.
right? Build right key is specifically for build packs sharing information that's just build time only dependencies, right? What if we just disallow build right and launching as true? And then the bill of materials problem isn't as much of a problem because we're not talking about anything in a different image. You're just talking about a build time cache that's shared between build packs. And if people want to collaboratively, build up a directory of different parts, they just use the app directory for that if the intent is to get it to the final image. So I think we could address this. Maybe we could address this just by saying build right equals true and launch equals true are not compatible flags.
I think people still care about the build bomb though, right? Like people have a use case for wanting to know what tools participated in the build.
You could say build right equals true and bomb and a layer specific bomb are not compatible. If you're doing this, you're talking about a shared cache. You should describe the usage of the tools that act over the shared cache in the main, bill of materials or in other layer bombs. Really special type of layer.
The other thing is that if it is a shared layer that subsequent build packs are using, they could possibly just add these things to their own build bomb. It won't come from the same layer. Like it won't come from this shared layer, but if they're using it and they're aware of these artifacts affecting their build process, they can also write it to their own build bomb.
Wouldn't get associated with the layer automatically then. Would be a disadvantage, but I don't know how bad that might not be a bad thing.
It's also like if you're using it transparently through a symlink or something, do you know that it is a layer exactly? Like, do you want to go, let's say I install something to this cache and I want to add the things I installed to my build bomb, but I'm installing something to the cache by running a command. Like I don't actually know what it's going to install yet. Then do I need to go, am I going to re-add the entire contents of the cache to my build bomb just so I don't miss anything, even if some other tool did it, right?
Don't Buildpacks have this problem writing their own layers anyways? Like they're running commands and they're not sure what happens, and then they generate a layer running that command, and then they're not totally sure what's in the layer, but they should be. Like,
The analogy I'm thinking of is sort of like if I, build a jar with Maven, like we're not parsing every combination of POM files to figure out in advance what that command's going to install. And so we're just looking at what got installed and adding it to the bomb. So if you know where these cache is and you know that your command added things to it, you can then go describe all the things that got added. But if you don't, like you put a lot of onus on the build pack to sort of do that beforehand and then make a diff if you're really sharing it.
Yeah, because I guess the other use case I can think of is, let's say a platform mounts this cache directory as a volume and just sets the environment variable to that. And like the CMake or whatever build back is just assuming this is a normal path. It doesn't know whether it's a special layer or whether it's just a random volume that's mounted.
If you set something as build writable, you can set launch equals true on that as well, right? Like there's nothing restricting us from like the way this, if I'm reading this proposal properly, like it's kind of an independent thing of launch.
Currently it is, I guess, but as Steven said, we can just stop people from having both launch equals true and build right equals true, and then have them say that if you want it to be launch equals true, use the application workspace instead.
serve the same purpose in the end.
Is there a reason to have build equals true and build writable equals true? Like, or does build writable mean that it's a build layer as well?
Hey, yeah, that's what it would mean if you said it.
So it's invalid if build equals false. So okay, usability wise, I don't love that. But
we could rename build.
There was a proposal, I think, to change build to not be a Boolean, right?
Yeah, there was that was like one of the issues, that whether it should just be a enum or like Boolean, or like if it's an enum, should it be like something similar to like Unix file permissions, where you have like read, write, or whatever, so that it's not like a random string that users are just expecting to get tried, or they can have a typo or something. But if it's just like a 0, 1, 2, 3 or something like that.
Not to take this conversation in a totally different direction, but I found myself wondering whether the build Boolean is really necessary in some ways. Like, it is now that we have this opt-in layer caching, but the difference between a build true and build false layer is only that, like things that are in the bin directory get added to the path, and things like environment variables get set, right? But we already have a way in a layer to say whether an environment variable is for build or for launch. And I don't know why a build pack would create a layer that has a bin in it and put a executable in there that it didn't want to expose. I guess it's exposing it for launch, but not for build. But I feel like the way we use build is confusing. I've in a couple of the RFCs I was looking through, I feel like we want to use build to mean something that's slightly different from what it means.
Build is also useful for caching. So because a launch only layer doesn't have to get regenerated, a launch plus build layer does have to be regenerated for subsequent build packs to be able to see it. I think the build pack has to have some way of saying this doesn't need to be around during build so that it doesn't have to get regenerated. There's a big difference performance-wise between launch true, build true, and launch true, build false.
Yeah. Okay. As I've said this out loud, I think build is necessary. I do think the way it interacts with this might be a little bit interesting, right? Like you could have a C cache layer that, is cache true, build false, that actually in launch false, that does everything you want it to do right now. Like you don't need to set build true to use the layer the way it's intended to be used.
But then it won't be available to subsequent build packs, right? It will only be available to the CMake build pack that's created it in the first place.
Well, if you're like sim linking it into a well-known location or something, or if you set the environment variable in a different layer, like it's totally possible to have a thing that other build packs use that is build false, because there's only a couple mechanisms through which we make things available,
It's
a tech violation in that case, very least.
Oh, I did not even know that was possible. I thought if build equals false, like that layer just gets like it's not there at all for subsequent build packs to interact with.
No, because if it's launch equals true, then it's still needed at the end, and so it's there. It's just the environment doesn't get set up for it. So you can have a build false layer and then make a symlink into home, and then that symlink other build pack can see. Although
I was not aware of that. I thought it was like literally shuffling build pack layers and removing them from the entire like.
Maybe it's a weird thing to do and therefore it's not relevant.
Yeah, I wonder if this RFC, and I hate to turn this into more work, but I wonder if this RFC could be a bunch of smaller RFCs. One that's like, we should fix the problem with, maybe this isn't even an RFC, maybe this is just an issue, but we should fix the thing where you can violate the spec by other build packs writing to a build layer, even though they're supposed to be read-only, by generating the layer TGCs after each build pack execution, but not add build write yet, right? Basically.
Ooh, that's a tricky in-between state, because I know people are doing that now. Yeah. And like I definitely want to solve that, but that would be kind of problematic.
I want to jump in and say that is not a hole in the spec. The spec is very clear. It's always been a hole in the implementation. Like nobody is supposed to be able to write to those. The fact that you can is a failure on the implementation's part, not the spec.
You know, I agree with that, but there isn't another solution at this time, and it works. And I'm just pointing out that it's challenging.
So I think maybe we can coordinate the migration to that somehow, but I think we need to do that. Like we need to solve that problem, right? Like we can be careful about how we solve it so that we give people another path forward, you know, at the same time it gets, but I think that's something that needs to happen. And then same thing with if it's not build equals true, we should also, you know, even if it's for launch, you know, move the layer, rename it, do something so that the symlink problem that Emily pointed out, or, you know, files that reference it to live other places, you know, like we should fix that, also probably a separate issue. And then there's kind of a third problem thing where we have some use cases that aren't covered. They look really narrow though, to me. It's like, it's not about building up a launch layer through several build packs because we have a work directory for that. It's really just about like a shared build time cache between build packs. And I think if you patch those other problems, right, and you're looking at this fresh, right, like I don't know if a build write layer would be the solution to solve that problem necessarily. Maybe there's some, is there a reason we said tempter doesn't work for that? Like a shared temp location, given that it's only going to be preserved at build time? I think there is, but I forget.
It's the caching and restoring, right?
Right, it's caching. And so is there a solution to that doesn't look like a build equals true layer somehow? Would you really want path exported on each run for a layer that all the build packs are writing to that's only a build? You know, like maybe this is really a kind of different thing. And we should patch the holes we have in the current thing so people don't abuse what we have in ways that result in bad metadata, but then come back and add the right feature for
Something a multi-build pack could provide for its whole set of build packs, a shared cache.
Are you saying like for the meta build pack to be able to set cached or something?
Yeah, I'm just spitballing things here.
To Steven's point about the exporting env, like in the Android SDK root example, wouldn't you would want to export that environment and not just share the layers, right? Like making the Android toolchain available to kind of a later build pack seems pretty fundamental to what you're trying to do in that example, right, Sam?
Yeah, and I guess like the symlink thing works if the tool's expected to be like a symlink. Otherwise, you'll have to symlink it, and then the subsequent build pack set an environment variable equal to the resolved path of that symlink. So that, I guess that's also something that each build pack will then have to be aware of. Like if we just remove this entirely and just use cache equals true and use symlinks to point to directories, and then each build pack would then have to hydrate the environment variable that it needs to from the symlink if it uses environment variables.
Didn't totally follow that last one. I feel like if you use environment variables, in a lot of ways, you don't need the symlinks, right? The symlinks are sort of there for tools that don't respect environment variables.
Are we not pushing Emily's new build pack type idea any further? Is that kind of dead in the water at this point?
It had other use cases which I've seen, but not related to this. Like the use case I've seen is someone setting up some like structure for subsequent build packs and then cleaning it up later. That was possibly one use of having two build steps, but it's not related. Like it's not the only solution to this problem.
Definitely seen cases like that where you need something to exist in a directory you'd like to cache, but you don't want to cache that one thing. So you'd like to remove it at the end.
But then why not just have that set to build equals true? Are you selectively removing things from the cache?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Like there's a case, the case I'm thinking of is like a Gradle properties case where you might want to bind secrets in using a binding. But Gradle's very weird and you can't set the path to this file using an environment variable. It has to be in Gradle home. And we want Gradle home to be a cached layer. So you want to like symlink the Gradle properties in there to the file that you got bound from the secret, because you don't want to copy the secret into a layer that gets cached or into the container file system. And then you want to clean up that symlink later, for your own sanity. You can have the build pack deal with it on the next build, or I think in our case, we don't expect subsequent build packs to use the cache or anything like that. So it's okay to clean it up after you're done. But situations like that, where there is one cleanup step you'd like to do before storing something in a cache.
Have a simple idea maybe that at least addresses the use case that I think, the kind of primary use case that I think the RFC is trying to address. Could we bring back the old, v2 build pack shared cache directory, like /cache, just like you have /app? It's a shared launch time, group of files that all the build packs are allowed to write to. Instead, could we patch the holes in, build equals true, the two things we talked about, and then introduce a /cache, and all the build packs can write to /cache however they want to write to it, in whatever ways they want to write to it, and it gets restored. Never ends up in the image, and always gets restored to the next run, just like a cache equals true layer.
I think the example I gave Sam, this example isn't just cache, but it's also launch, the Android SDK root.
But then shouldn't you use the apter for that? Why can't you use the apter? If a whole bunch of build packs need to write to the same directory that needs to end up at launch, what's the problem with workspace for that?
Yeah, it might be fine. I'm not sure.
Sometimes there are cases where you don't want to be rendering something like this into the workspace, right? Maybe the workspace is supposed to be set up a certain way.
What if we take go ahead, Steven.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what if we take Steven's idea, but and kind of combine it with this RFC where base you get like build write, but only in that cacher, so you can create like folders in there. But if you set build equals true in there, then it is globally writable across all build packs. But then stuff in your normal like layers that's namespace by build pack is read only and can never only be read only. So by default, people are creating read only stuff, but in Steven's like special cache layers or whatever, it is shareable, and that's kind of a distinction between the two. And so other build packs don't have to like know the structure of another build pack's layers dir, but they can always look in this like shared cache directory if they want to write to it.
The only issue that may happen with like the shared cache directory is some other build pack can then unintentionally wipe out this, like the entire shared cache directory, including all the subfolders, and then you can't control that. So at least with this, you can control that. Okay, you can only touch this directory that I've exposed through an environment variable, whereas there you're just exposing the world to everything.
But you have the same problem with the workspace there right now, right? if any build pack at any point can just nuke all of the source code or whatever's happened in the app directory. So I see this as having the same disadvantages. It's just completely analogous to the thing we already have.
Right.
It's a cached build time only version.
The difference being if something goes wrong in the workspace, your app image fails to launch. If something goes wrong in the cache, I guess it's just a slower build and you may not notice it until things actually happen. So like the final application image that's produced, that would reflect any changes to the workspace. Whereas for this cache, there's no easy way for introspection during the build process, like what's happening.
What makes it feel better in the app than in the cache layer is that the app never gets restored. Whatever changes you're making to it, you have to make again next time. So we have this whole setup basically where Buildpacks use metadata to decide what work to do or not do or redo. And if unknown changes have happened, it sort of doesn't work anymore.
Isn't that true for a build write true cache true layer also?
Yeah, that's why I want to say that was sort of the motivation behind my original proposal, where one build pack is taking responsibility for this layer, but we give it a chance to write the metadata at the end. So it's writing whatever it needs to decide what to do next time. Like it's responsible for putting things, for giving itself the information it needs to make decisions next time.
What's preventing that same build pack from completely changing the flags during the next, like the second time it runs, if it has access to every metadata file?
From changing the flags.
Yeah.
It can change the flags if it wants to. It's responsible for the layer. It can make whatever changes it wants. It is allowing other build packs to put things in its layer, but it gets a chance at the end to look at what got in there and decide what to do with it.
I think I just noticed we have 4 more things on the agenda that, or the agenda got larger since we kind of started the discussion, I think. I think we've talked about a lot of different ideas here. Sam, hopefully this is helpful to, does this give you enough of a path forward to maybe cut this off and move on to some other agenda items? Maybe we can have a longer discussion during office hours tomorrow then. Just want to make sure we leave time.
Yeah, I can put my idea down into the RFC too.
Everybody okay with moving on? Sorry, I didn't mean to. Cool. Disambiguate layer metadata files.
This is the part of the meeting where you complain about output, the name output, right?
Oh yeah, okay.
I'll try to share. Where is it? This is the current proposed structure. This is the current structure.
I think just to jump right into my disagreement with output, the primary thing you're doing as a build pack is writing these layers, right? The layer paths, data that the build pack's writing, binaries, whatever, kind of end up everywhere. They feel very primary, or the kind of most important thing in the image, is this layer output that the build pack's writing. And it seems like we're trying to kind of stuff those layers into another directory because of something that's less primary or less important to that process, right? Which is some metadata that's kind of ephemeral the build packs are going to write. So to me, it feels wrong to kind of push everything down into another directory and make all the paths longer because we're having trouble coming up with the UX for capturing metadata, and the previous UX put it right next to those layers, right? I think if we looked at this fresh, we wouldn't be like, we should shove all the layers down here so we can have ephemeral files that sit at a level above them. We would be like, what's the right interface for providing the ephemeral files?
It's not just Buildpack ephemeral files, it's lifecycle ephemeral files. I guess I see your point, but I think there are practical reasons not to want to add a second volume. I feel like adding a second volume would be the natural solution to what you're talking about.
What's the disadvantage to adding a second volume for ephemeral things? Do we need a volume? I guess some of those things need to survive between the executions. What's the disadvantage to adding another volume? It's just more
For
complex.
practicality, yeah, more complex for like platform authors, like Tecton and stuff like that. Implementers, you've got to understand that there's two different ones, and understanding whether that needs to persist and should that be a really fast drive or can it be a slow drive? Like, I don't know, there's things like that just on the infrastructure side that at least, I don't know, having starting out with a single volume feels nice to me.
And there's also like performance implications and Kate's binding to persistent disks.
Okay, so what is in with Sam's proposed format? What does the those environment variables get bound to each of the layers directories during build, and what are we would just be passing that same escape build pack ID as the layers dir for each build pack. So the build pack interface here doesn't change. It would just be the paths, right?
Other than the build pack now gets a different place to put its config files.
Right. Wouldn't write them into escaped build pack ID. What's config/metadata, Tom?
It is a file that I've been wanting to get rid of for a long time that's generated by the builder and read by the exporter and launcher. But it serves as basically just a dumping ground, and it should be broken up into more targeted things.
Why isn't that in output at the top level?
Right now it's in config metadata. I think that's why it's in here in this proposal as well. You can move it out though.
Cool. If I'm not going to stand in the way of this organization if we can choose something that's not output. I feel like that's weird. It's like it makes sense during the build process, but I don't think it makes sense when you're looking at the final image, right? When you have that final image at the end, you see /output and all the software is installed in /output, and it feels like you're seeing a build time artifact or something. So if we could think of a word, it's not that. You took up C and B, right, already.
I agree with that. I wish we hadn't. Once upon a time, this was called Workspace, and the after was called App. We changed it because we wanted to work with Knative Build, which doesn't even exist anymore, and wouldn't let you put the app anywhere other than /workspace. And I really regret that. I wish this was /workspace and app was /app.
Should we just make that change? I don't think it would.
Or you even put it on the same volume, workspace, app, workspace, layers.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
One volume.
Do we have, so we already have 2 volumes for the workspace. Is that
Yeah,
gonna
we
be,
don't want 3 volumes. I'd love to get down to 1 volume though.
some platforms are gonna want to keep the after in a separate volume, right? At least Knative Build did. Maybe Tecton doesn't care about that anymore. Is it going to be a problem that if we did that, we'd nest the volumes, right? You'd have workspace be a volume, and then you'd have workspace app be a nested, volume mounted on top of that. That might be fine. Just
I think that should work, but
yeah.
I think so as well, but I'd feel better if Javier, since he's been messing with Tecton, if he was here.
There's
I
no
would get his opinion.
Linux does not have a problem with this. That would be, I'm just wondering if there's some restriction in some platform that's like, no, these are, platform volumes and they're not supposed to overlap because it confuses our something, right? Like, it's less about pack and Docker, more about, I don't know. If we don't think that's a problem, then I would support that. Slash workspace becomes everything. Slash workspace app becomes the apter, and slash workspace layers becomes layerster. It seems pretty cleanly organized.
Do we like slash app or slash source? Something like that. I don't know. I'm okay with slash app, but I know app is
Because you
overloaded
can
too.
change what's in there to make it not the source anymore if you want to.
I mean, if you're just gonna call it slash workspace slash layers, we can just rename output to layers. It's the same thing. No.
Layers.
Yeah, I mean, like if you're just gonna put this whole thing under workspace slash layers, we can just call this layers and be done with it.
I'm saying call output workspace. Put the app in the structure too.
Yeah. App adjacent
Yeah.
layer.
So yeah, right above group toml slash app, and that's where your app code is as well.
Alternatively, if we didn't want to move the app directory because we felt like that would break people too much, we could, I had an idea. Oh, we could call slash output buildpack or buildpacks because it's all buildpack generated code and we don't have that as a top level key.
Some of this is lifecycle generated code.
For the
The
purpose,
group and plan.
it'd be like slash buildpack, then the path would be buildpack layers and then the buildpack ID, right?
Slash CMB. Oh wait, we already have that.
That's something else. That would be my, if we didn't want to do more changes, that would be my second best option, I think, because the path would be very descriptive. Buildpack layers, buildpack ID, and then the software installed.
One alternative that was suggested was build space for the same directory.
Workspace and build space.
I like it.
I don't like made up words.
I'm with you, Joe. I think it works. I think it's good.
But then in the image at the end,
These are all made up words. Every word in software is made up. None of these are real
App is
words.
not a word, for example. There's this thing called an application we could go with.
Just call it build at that point, right?
Problem
It's
is
where
that
the build happens. Everything is part of what happened during the operation we call build in the spec. We can make one called rebase for rebase if we wanted to.
problem is that it ends up being the directory structure in the image that gets generated. And so if you have all these layers and you're looking at, like, you're trying to analyze this image you generated and they're all in the build space, I feel like, it's the context is now wrong. It's like,
Let's call it droplet.
Sluglet? Wasn't
Yeah,
that what we
sluglet.
called it for a while?
okay, so we got 4 minutes left. I think we came up with one idea that I heard nobody say they didn't like, at least, which is move app into output and then rename output to workspace. Do we have enough ideas that we can keep iterating and then we can move on to the next one? Meta build packs / lifecycle extensions.
Yeah, that was something that I was thinking about. So meta build packs in the sense that build packs that run on top of like the layers directory instead of like the application, and then like have it like extend whatever content is on each build packs layer directory with something, or just a way of creating extensions to the lifecycle so that if we want to try something new, we don't have to change the lifecycle. We can have this meta build pack provide some functionality. So one example was like the profile D use case. So you can have a meta build pack that looks at profile D, does the appropriate things for each of the build pack, and then you can get rid of it from lifecycle, but you can have this one meta build pack included in your builder that does it for every build pack, rather than having some library that each build pack has to include to generate the appropriate things. Or something like, let's say, apart from the typical environment variables that we export for given paths. So like if you want to export lib64 for each of the like build packs output to LD library path or something like that, you can just have one meta build pack that runs on top of each of them and does it. And build packs can opt into the meta build pack that they want to run on top of it or something like that. But that was just like some random idea that I was thinking of.
We already have a meta build pack right now means just a grouping of other build packs. It's like if you have a build pack toml and instead of defining some contents, it says,
I never wrote that word down though. And I've been pushing for multi-build pack because it doesn't make any sense to be a meta build pack.
So just to make sure I understand, this is not related to that concept.
No.
It's like a shim, right? You want to like shim every build pack, like be shimmed by this, basically.
Yes. So this would allow us to like include things like profile D, or like these are essentially life cycle extensions, so to say, where like there's some arbitrary code that runs on each build pack's output that can modify it slightly so that like the final output is like you have some shared way to extend each build pack's functionality.
So this is like a build pack. You want to change the behavior of a build pack, but you're not that build pack's author. And you maybe you want to change the behavior of a whole bunch of different build packs in your build process, but you don't want to go fork all those build packs and make changes to them. So you want the ability to optionally include like a hook that says this hook runs in different contexts, maybe at launch in the profile context, maybe at build time in the build context, right? After each build pack runs. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I guess my idea was just at build time rather than at launch time, but I guess you could also extend it to launch time. But that was the idea, yes.
Hopefully you can change whatever you want to change about launch at build time. I can see why this is useful, but I worry we're just making something that's already complex for people to understand very complex.
Like this was more of like how other languages have a way of like providing an extension alongside an RFC to prove its worth before it can be pulled into it, or like providing something that can be applied to a wide range of things. And it was sort of inspired from that profile D conversation where we want to move something out, but we want like a set of build packs to retain certain functionalities.
We're over time. I gotta drop off.
Just want to remind everyone that tomorrow at office hours and next week, Nali and Sam are going to lead Researcher Out workshop. So just before everyone don't forget about it.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.